From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
President Obama met behind closed doors this week with Senate Democrats, including Rhode Island's Jack Reed, to hammer out goals for the new Congress on the eve of his State of the Union address. What can the Democrats, now in the minority party in both chambers, get done in 2015, and what does it mean for Rhode Island with its all-Democratic delegation? Our guests this week on Newsmakers, U.S. Senator Jack Reed and Congressman David Cicilline. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Congressman Cicilline will join us on the second half of the program. Joining me on the panel, as always, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Senator, welcome back to the program. It's really good to have you.
Good to see you.
So as I said in that open, you and other Senate Democrats met behind closed doors. That was on Thursday with the president. Take us into the room on Thursday. What did he say?
Well, what he said is he's going to stay on the initiative, and he's going to base his approach on growing the economy through the middle class, making sure that those people who are working get rewarded for their work. Those skills that are necessary to be competitive in this world, we're going to help these Americans get those skills through job training, through, as he mentioned, enhancement of community college access.
Which all needs congressional approval.
It does need congressional approval, but he's going to start out challenging the Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, to step up to the plate, to start expanding the middle class, making work rewarding, literally. What we've seen over the last several decades, not this administration, is that the stagnation of wages for working people, that's got to reverse, because we want growth to be based upon an expanding middle class, not a trickle-down theory. That theory hasn't worked. That's the last several decades of Republican philosophy. So he's going to take the initiative on a broad range of fronts. So he's going to challenge the Congress to step up to the plate and participate and collaborate.
You see him not playing as much defense, but more offense? Some reports say
I think
what
that's
he said
exactly
in the room.
Right. I think that's exactly right. It's like I have to go to challenge the Congress and ask to work with them, but to challenge them, not just simply sit back and see what will be done. And I think the point is, the focus has to be on how do we grow the economy, how do we do it through expanding our middle class, and that, I think, is the line that he's going to draw.
You know, I read some reports where senators asked him a lot of questions in that room. Were you one of them? Did you have any questions for him?
No, I took very good notes, though.
Can we see those notes?
Someday, when I write my memoir.
Okay.
No, there was a series. Obviously, there was 40+ senators in the room. There were lots of questions. His answers were very thoughtful and extensive. He's very knowledgeable about all the topics he talked about. And I learned a lot, frankly. And sometimes you learn more by listening than by asking questions.
What was the mood in the room among the senators? I mean, it was not a great election for your self-accepted. Congratulations on that. But for the Democrats, you lost the majority. I mean, are the senators frustrated with President Obama? How much blame did they put on him for what happened last year?
This is not an issue of a blame. And this is an issue of looking ahead, really. What can we accomplish together for the benefit of the American people? And we've got huge challenges. We've got challenges in terms of our economy. It's beginning to grow. When the president took over in 2009, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Now, for many, many months, I think for a long period, much longer than any other recovery, we've been gaining jobs, but not enough. And then the real issue is those jobs have to come with increased wages for the workers. We haven't seen that. So we've got a lot to do. So this is not about looking back. This is about working together for the benefit of the American people.
Senator Whitehouse, when he was on with us a couple months ago, was critical, though, of the president. He did put some blame on his shoulders, said, he clearly lost touch, he thought, I'm paraphrasing, with the American people in a lot of ways last year, which is part of why the Democrats' message get across. Do you feel similarly that the president kind of lost the plot a bit in connecting with the voters?
Well, I think what happened in terms of the presidential role, there was a series of, and the president even indicated this in discussions, if you look at sort of what dominated the media, it was first the unaccompanied children from Mexico. So it's a presidential reaction, but what was done or not done was very adroitly sort of exploited both by the media and by the Republicans. Then you had the situation of the rise of ISIS, again another sort of presidential thing. All these issues here, the president's, I think, response was sound, but it raised the issue of sort of is he, the classic leading from the front, or leading, et cetera, and that I think shaped a lot of the election. The reality, of course, now is that, particularly with respect to the last big flare-up, Ebola, it seems to have receded completely, although it's still there. We still have issues with it. Some of these other issues have receded. So I think in terms of the context of the election, clearly the Republicans were very adroit at making the president, even though it wasn't on the ballot, an issue. And that in several places, I think, did not help our candidate.
Senator, in Congress, one area of potential common ground with Republicans and Democrats may be infrastructure spending on roads, highways, and bridges. But there isn't a consensus on how to pay for what could be a $100 billion price tag. Some are proposing a hike in the gas tax. Would you support that?
I would look at it very closely for several reasons. One is these are unavoidable costs. We cannot pass on to the next generation of Americans decrepit roads that are falling apart and getting worse every day. Our parents and grandparents actually built these roads and paid for them. They were responsible. They were, one of the reasons why they were the greatest generation. We've got that similar responsibility. There are other ways to do this. The issue of these infrastructure banks, whether we can encourage through tax incentives or some other form of subsidy, private investment in infrastructure. There's a whole range of things, but I don't think you can take off the table, particularly at this juncture where gasoline prices are so low. Looking at the gasoline price, one thing I would suggest—
they're low now, but that could always change.
Exactly right. That's why there could be something where you not only are able to generate revenues, but in the proposal you have sort of a stabilization point where if gasoline prices rise to a certain level, either the tax stops and the increase stops, or you could catch it both ways. If it goes down further, maybe there's room on toleration for several cents higher than you would like to think of, and then if it goes up quite a bit, then you taper back the tax. So this stabilization mechanism could make a lot of sense. But you're absolutely right, Tim. We're looking probably at several months of relatively low prices, but to assume that this is going to be the future for the next several years is probably not responsible.
A lot of the action in Congress happens in committees, even though they don't get necessarily as much attention in the headlines day to day. And you've had some changes we wanted to ask you about. You're now the ranking member, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. If the Democrats had held the majority, you'd of course be the chairman. For folks at home who aren't familiar with the ins and outs of Congress, what are your new responsibilities as the ranking member on armed services, and do you get more staff? What's it like?
Well, you do get staff. You are the leader among the Democrats on the committee, and you have a close working relationship with the chairman, in this case Senator John McCain, who I respect as a great patriot and someone who is certainly sincerely committed to the American military. We've worked together before, and I anticipate working with him in the future. In Rhode Island specifically, it's critical. We have the submarine program, which is essential to our national security, electric boat, not only essential to our national security, but a major sort of job generator together with Newport. Roughly, defense spending in the state is about 7% of our gross domestic product. And again, these are the jobs that are the well-paying jobs, not just at the top, but throughout the entire enterprise. So that's important both strategically and economically. Then we have a whole series of issues that are going to face us. We have our conduct in the Middle East with respect to ISIL and ISIS situation, which is challenging. We have challenges across the globe. We have this new cybersecurity challenge, which is absolutely critical. We have to move very quickly, and Senator McCain and I are already talking about how we could deal with that. So it's a very important committee for the country and also for Rhode Island.
The other one, you switched your subcommittee on appropriations, which controls the purse. That's a really big deal, appropriations. You're now Transportation and Housing and Urban Development, THUD, as Tim pointed out, subcommittee.
Or THUD as...
THUD, okay.
prefer that.
Looks like
Okay.
THUD in the
Acronym, all right.
Why did you switch to the Transportation Subcommittee, and especially in a state with the transportation needs of Rhode Island? Do you think you'll be able to maybe advocate for projects here more in that position?
Absolutely. We've been very successful working with the Department of Transportation. The investment at Green Airport, over $100 million to make it a safer and an international capable airport. Indeed, we've seen because of the great efforts at the state level and at the Airport Authority, the governor, Mayor Abedizian, et cetera. Now we have a German airline starting service next summer, an international carrier. But we'll see more of that, I hope. But that investment without the federal dollars wouldn't have been as timely or successful. So that's one example. Transit programs, we have transit programs, and of course highways. I mean, we have a national need to renovate, renew, expand our highway system, and that requires resources, and the committee that I will be the ranking member of allocates those resources. I'm also pleased, too, to be working with Senator Susan Collins from Maine. Susan's
Who's the chairwoman.
And we've worked together on a host of issues. In fact, we worked together to support a commuter rail both in Maine and in Rhode Island. Again, another important aspect of our economy. We've worked together on a host of issues. So I look forward on a bipartisan basis of working. And there's no state in this union that doesn't need better highways, better improvements, repairs. Rhode Island is no exception, so I'm hopefully be able to help.
Scary times in Europe, Senator. As we speak, we tape on a Friday. Raids are being conducted in Belgium and France in response to the violence there, which has been tied to ISIS. You're entitled to sit on the Senate Intelligence Committee as a ranking member of Armed Services. Are these isolated incidents or more orchestrated?
They are a combination of individuals that receive some training and direction. As the French terrorists were in Yemen, at least one of them, and received some training. Then there are others that are self-radicalized because of many different sources, and they don't get explicit training, but they are equally or potentially dangerous. So the raids today in Europe are a reflection of individuals that they've been tracking closely, particularly those that have been through Yemen and Syria coming back in. And one of the aspects of Europe is that they have rather large Muslim populations. The French, because of their involvement in Algeria and Tunisia for hundreds of years. Other countries have significant Muslim populations. And so there's a lot of traffic back and forth between Syria and those places and Europe, and they're beginning to focus very seriously and begin, as the raids indicate today, to preemptively sort of take out, and hopefully without any loss of life, these potential terrorists.
We're seeing some hubbub now on the Republican side of the presidential race as that gears up for next year. Still pretty quiet publicly on the Democratic side, but we have heard reports Hillary Clinton starting to staff up for a run. Will you support Hillary Clinton for the nomination? I know you don't usually get involved in those things, but...
The first step is to declare you're running, and then you know,
have fun with us.
I just, this is it should be, in my view, at least obvious that, you know, Senator Clinton, First Lady Clinton, Secretary Clinton, someone I work with closely, know very well, extraordinarily talented, but, you know, she is trying to weigh a very difficult decision, and, you know, you can handicap what she's going to do, but until she stands up and says, I'm running, I think you have to allow her the time to make that decision.
What do you think she'll end up doing? Do you expect her to run? Right now, if you were a betting man, would you expect her to run?
You know, I think most people assume she's going to run, and that's not an irrational assumption, but I also know that, you know, there's that last minute where you think, and I recall Mario Cuomo, who just left us recently, an incredible public servant, an incredible governor, et cetera, but he was literally sitting on an airplane in Albany with the engines running, ready to go to New Hampshire and file, and decided no, New York needed him more because of deficit problems, and stepped away. And everyone had already assumed he was in, this was going to take place. you've got to, I think, wait till someone steps up and says, I'm going.
We have to go to a break, but most people are watching this program right before the Patriots-Colts game. How are you feeling?
I feel good. Patriots are the best. Brady's the best quarterback that's strapped on a pair of shoulder pads. In my view, I'm not at all objective.
You're not even up for re-election.
I know.
Belichick is a great coach. They have a great team, and the Kraft family are, I think, very decent, not only football people but community people. So, I think you've got a great team. I hope they go all the way and win big in Phoenix for the Super Bowl.
Bold opinions. Bold opinions, Senator.
Yeah, I just get real nervous if they have to put me in.
Yeah.
They're in desperate situations.
Senator Jack Reed, thank you for joining us on the program. When we come back, we'll be joined by Congressman David Cicilline. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, my colleague from WPRI.com, Ted Nesi, and we welcome on the second half Congressman David Cicilline. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
The Republicans in the House have the biggest majority since right before the Great Depression. I'm wondering if you're starting to feel like a Republican in the Rhode Island General Assembly.
No. Look, I've been in the minority since I got elected to Congress. The Republicans increased their majority in the House. But we have a responsibility to try to work together and find common ground and get things done for the American people. And despite being in the minority, I'm doing everything I can to be effective for our state, continuing to push manufacturing, continuing to fight to protect Medicare and Social Security, to be sure we're investing in job training and protecting access to higher education, all the things which are, I think, priorities for most Americans. So finding ways to work together with folks on the other side of the aisle, but
how can you have that sort of, we even heard Jack Reed say that, and Senator Reed on the first half, trying to find common ground. But look, we haven't seen much of that, and it seems like we're in for another 2 years. A lot of people look at it and say it's going to be another grind.
Well, I think, we'll see. I think the Republicans are going to have to make a decision. They can either do for 2 years what they've started to do already, that is pass bills that the president has already said he would veto, and we can have 2 years of them passing legislation, the president vetoing it, we sustain the vetoes, and nothing gets done. Or they can come to the realization that they've got to reach some common ground with the Democratic president, and so find that place where you can find agreement on an issue and move forward on it. And there are issues. Manufacturing is one. Rebuilding the infrastructure of our country is another. Being sure that we're responding to the threat of terrorism. So there are areas where we can work together, but I think the American people will exact a tremendous cost on the Republican Party if for 2 years they pass legislation that the president has said he would veto and nothing is done. I think they expect parties to work together to address the urgent issues facing our country, and I'm an optimist. I think we can find a way to do it. We have to fight for the things that matter to Rhode Island and matter to our country, but we've got to find ways to work together.
I want to ask you something happening in the heart of your district, Pawtucket. The Boston Globe's reports that the Paw Sox could leave are getting a lot of attention. As I said, Pawtucket, right at your district office, is actually there. Have you talked to anyone about what's going on with the Paw Sox? Are you concerned?
I think, look, the Paw Sox are incredibly important to our state, not just to Pawtucket, not just to my district, but they're a treasured asset of this state, and we should all be prepared to do what we can to make sure they stay here. I've reached out to the governor's office to make myself available to help in any way. I know Mayor Grebian has done the same. I think we've got to work local, state, and federal partnership here to be sure that we do what needs to be done. If you remember, the state had to do some things to McCoy one time in the past. I think we need to, think about what we can do to strengthen that relationship, but it's important to the economy. It's important to lots and lots of families who enjoy those games, and we have to work hard to make sure they don't leave Rhode Island.
You brought up infrastructure when you talk about common ground, and that does seem to be a place, fixing the country's roads, highways, their bridges. I asked Senator Reed about this. The one area there might not be a lot of consensus is how to pay for it. It could be $100 billion. One proposal on the table is to increase the gas tax. Would you support it?
I think there is no question that we have got to rebuild the infrastructure of this country. If you look at the reports that are done, we are so far behind in terms of what we need to invest to repair our roads, our bridges, our ports, our transit systems. It's a way to put people to work right away, not just the construction work, but the engineers and the cement manufacturers and all of the related industries. So it's a way to really get people back to work. And also it's something we have to do. It doesn't repair itself. The longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes. And we've got to pay for it.
Gas tax.
So I think gas tax is one method we should look at, particularly at a time when gas prices are low. But we've got to figure out how to fund the Highway Trust Fund over the long term. This is one of the urgent challenges facing our country. If we're going to have a real economic recovery, part of it has to be because we've rebuilt the infrastructure.
So when you say we'd look at the gas tax when the prices are low, are you saying there'd be a trap door?
Right, there are some proposals that say, you can increase the gas tax if, gas is below a certain price, and then you reduce it when the gas goes up.
Can you reliably fund a major project, an infrastructure project like that, with those sorts of unpredictable?
I think I've always said that the gas tax as a method for funding infrastructure is actually just the reverse, because as gas prices go up, and people use their own vehicles less and use public transportation, the funds available for public transportation go down. So the exact reverse happens. So it's not really a good model for rebuilding infrastructure. We should actually appropriate money directly from the general treasury. But we have in place a gas tax, and what I'm saying is, at least in the short term, we need to find a way to fund the Highway Trust Fund so that we can at least meet the current responsibilities of our infrastructure.
You voted against the budget compromise at the end of last year. Obviously, if enough of your colleagues had followed your lead, there would have been a government shutdown, and you've been very critical of when Republicans have flirted with a government shutdown in the past. Was that just a protest vote because you knew it would pass?
No. Look, this budget compromise, first of all, included a major giveaway to Wall Street, a rollback of a very important provision in Dodd-Frank that protects taxpayers from being on the hook for some of the riskiest derivatives. It repealed that, so it put taxpayers back on the hook for the kind of financial practices that led to the meltdown that almost brought our economy to its knees. It included, in addition to that, funding for the Syrian rebels, which I opposed. It included cuts to Pell Grants. It included a series of other provisions that I thought were not good for Rhode Island, not good for our country. And it increased, at the same time they gave this big gift to Wall Street, they also allowed special interests to pour millions more dollars into political parties and to influence our elections. So I think there were provisions of that compromise which were very bad, which were not good for Rhode Island, not good for our country.
If there was a real risk of a shutdown, would you have voted the same way?
Well,
actually shut down the government?
There was never a question that it was going to pass. The Republicans supported it. I've been very clear that a government shutdown is never a good idea. The Republicans shut the government down, and there was tremendous harm that was done to our country. That was not the case here, but that was a bad compromise.
Jorge Elorza was sworn in as Providence's new mayor. What's your advice to him?
I've had the
been there,
privilege. Yes, I've had the privilege of spending a lot of time with the new mayor, both during his campaign and his first days in office. I think he's doing a terrific job. He has put together a terrific team and has brought a lot of energy to his new position. It's very clear that he's focused on all that he can do to rebuild the Providence economy, get people back to work. I was with him last night at a gathering of social entrepreneurs where he's really talking about Providence as being a city of great entrepreneurs and great creative people. I think he's going to be a great mayor. I think he's very, very focused on the priorities that he should be focused on in terms of getting people back to work, in terms of investing in our education system. And, he and I know will continue to talk a lot, and I'm always happy.
So there was nothing where you said, when I did that, that was not a good idea.
Oh, I'm sure there are going to be lots of conversations we've had like that, but the most important conversation I've had with him so far was, put together a good team, and he did that. He's, I think, brought some real talent into City Hall, and I think he'll continue to do that.
Did you ever, when you were mayor, consider or look at the possibility that Providence might have to file for municipal bankruptcy? Problems that extend well past from before you were the mayor. The city has a lot of debts between the pensions and its other things.
No, that was never a realistic option that we considered. Every year you're sort of in the same position of trying to generate new revenues and ask the General Assembly for more money, or finding new ways to generate revenues on the city side, and cutting expenses and figuring out how you kind of piece together to meet those obligations. But I think that's the life of being a mayor of a city, and I know that Jorge will do a great job.
talk about immigration if we could. The president's executive order on immigration angered Republicans and I guess you could say galvanized a push for their version of reform. Looking back, hindsight is 2020. Do you think it was a mistake for the president to take that aggressive approach and rather than try to work and find that common ground that you
Well,
talked about?
actually, the president has worked to find that common ground. We have a bipartisan bill that has Democratic and Republican support. It passed the Senate overwhelmingly with support from both parties. If that bill were brought to the floor, it would have passed the House. The president has been saying, what we've all been saying, is that the best way to deal with the broken immigration system is comprehensive immigration reform, bipartisan bill that will fix our broken immigration system. We don't have to imagine what that would look like. There's a bill already, and it's passed the Senate. So the president has been very persistent in calling on Congress to enact comprehensive immigration reform. And I think he made it clear, look, if Congress is unwilling to do its job, I have the responsibility as president of the United States to do what I can within my limited authority to respond to it. That's what he did in the executive order. But he said even when
Are you okay with all the executive orders he's been governing that way?
Absolutely. Look,
And if a Republican president
a Republican president did it. President Ronald Reagan
and
did
Democrats
an executive order.
screamed from the rooftops.
But there was no question he had the authority to do it, and he did it. And look, it's always better if Congress enacts comprehensive legislation on an important issue. But as the president has said, he has the responsibility as president of the United States to use the executive power of his office to address the urgent challenges facing our country.
I have 20 seconds left, and I do want you to tell everybody who you're taking to the State of the Union on Tuesday.
Bob Billington, who is the executive director of Blackstone Valley Tourism Council, he has been advocating for a national park in the Blackstone Valley for almost 30 years. He and a group of wonderful advocates and great organizations, and we were successful in getting a national park created in our state, and I wanted to recognize all the work that others did.
Thank you for watching Newsmakers. We'll see you next week. Go Patriots. Thank you.